I know we've only known each other for 4 weeks and 3 days, but to me, it seems like 9 weeks and 5 days.
All right, all right, all right. Welcome, welcome, all my garden enthusiasts and passionate plant people to Let's Get Growing. Right here on the Urban Gardener channel. I'm Enoch. I'm your host today, and we've got a really, really awesome show ahead for you today. It is the third Sunday of the month, and on the third Sunday of the month, you all know it's time for our monthly gardening book club. We've got a really great book club ahead for you today. We've got joining with us just a little bit later in the show, Kim Stoddart, as we're featuring her book, The Climate Change Resilient Vegetable Garden, How to Grow Food in a Changing Climate. Kim will be joining with us here a little bit later on the show with our good friend, Mark Boucher Colbert, MBC. He'll be with us here in just a few minutes for his In the Garden segment as well. It's always great to have Mark with us, joining us live here on the show for our monthly gardening book club. So we look forward to that also here in just a few minutes as well too. So if you all are joining with us here right now live on the show, definitely hit that thumbs up, click the like button there, as well as the subscribe and the bell notification, so you can be notified of all of our upcoming videos and live shows here at the Let's Get Growing show, as well as share with all of your friends. Let all of your garden friends out there know about the Let's Get Growing show. And yeah, thank you for all of that. Big, huge shout out to all of you who are joining with us here on the replay too. Thank you so much for joining with us here on your time. And if you can as well too, click that like button, get down into the comment section below. Let me know you are here, and let me know if you got any suggestions. Let me know if there are any of your favorite gardening books maybe that you'd might like to see on our monthly gardening book club. Definitely jump into the comment section below. Let me know any of those, as well as just say hi if you want to just say hi too. And I love hearing from all of you. So definitely do that. Questions or comments for us here on the show, if you're joining with us live, definitely put those into the chat. And if you can, if you have any questions for our guests coming up here, put them in big, bold, capital letters, and I can tell those questions from the regular conversation. So awesome. Excellent. Also, as well, too, links down below to all of our guests as well too, and link as well to get a copy of your own copy of Kim Stoddart's book, The Climate Resilient Vegetable Garden. So check out those links below. And yeah, great to have you all here. Thank you all so much for joining with us here today for the show. We've got a really great show for you. Like I said, talking all about climate resilience in our garden. Lots and lots of things to think about in a climate changing world we live in right now. And, you know, a lot of us gardeners, especially gardeners, we're the ones who really can see a lot of these effects and changes, you know, because we're trying to grow plants and food and all that sort of stuff through some of these major changes. And I know this definitely right here living in Southern Oregon for sure. I mean, there's just so many changes. I moved here 13 years ago and started my vegetable gardening adventure right here in Southern Oregon. And ever since, it just seems year after year, things seem to change even more so. One of the things I talk about here on the show a lot is tomatoes. Tomatoes are a big one. I just really used to, for the first several years I lived here. In fact, even leading up to some of the very first couple years of my channel here, I was able to grow most any type of tomato I wanted to right out here. And just it seems like over the last several seasons here, I've been having to switch over and look for varieties, specific varieties of tomatoes that will grow in the you know, just the hotter and hotter weather we're getting here. Summers are getting hotter and hotter. We're getting, you know, just more and more intense heat and all of that. So I'm having to take strategies, shading and all these other things that I didn't used to have to do before in order to grow some of my tomatoes. And in some varieties, I just can't get to grow hardly at all. Ones that I used to grow without a problem around here. So, we'll talk a lot about all of these sort of things that are in this really great book here. I better get it out for everybody too. The Climate Change Resilient Vegetable Garden here. And yeah, lots and lots to talk about that. Let's jump in here and see who we've got joining with us here in the chat today. Let's see here. Of course, I want to. I usually see, but there we go. There we are. Let's say hi to Jay Dixon, our facilitator in the conversation there. Thank you for joining with us, Jay. Thank you for all that you do there, putting in all the links and everything. So everybody else, keep an eye out for those. Jay will be dropping links as we're talking about things, topics and different sort of things like that. Or as well, too, here's another thing. If you do have a channel, you're new to the show and you're just jumping in here and you have like a channel or something like that, jump into the conversation. Jay will throw a link out for your channel too for everybody else as well too. We love doing small channel shout outs around here as well too. So definitely jump in and do that. We've got Adam as well, my good friend and other moderator here, joining us from right up the road here from me in Southern Oregon. He's up in Central Point, Oregon. Thanks, Adam, for joining with us here today. I see we got Rick joining with us here from we always say, the future, nice and bright and early there in Australia. Rick getting with us in the chat there, and DLR 978 looking. Oh yeah, looking forward to the equinox in a couple of days. Yeah, that's right too. We are getting ready to bust through the door of spring this week too. Spring's just coming up here in just a few days. That's always really exciting as well too. And yeah, so really looking forward to all of the great gardening happenings that we're going to get to here as we move into springtime now. So it's really time to get growing now for sure. All right. Let's see here. Kevin, thank you for joining with us here. It's great to see you here joining with us. And Bohemian Herbology, Natural Solutions, good to see you. Great to have you in the chat with us there, John Jude. All right. Thank you for being here with us today. Let's see, we got Penny. Excellent. Thank you for being here. All right. Let's see. I want to make sure we get in here, see everybody. Thank you so much. Oh, wow. We got Janice Driver. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for joining with us today. She says, greetings from Montana. Awesome. Lots of great new names here. I'm seeing some really great new names in the chat right now. Awesome. Lawrence, thank you for being here. Thanks for joining with us here. It's great to have you with us. Right on. Excellent, everybody. Also, too, real quick here, I want to mention to everybody, let's see here, if you didn't get a chance to check out last Sunday's show, last Sunday edition, we had on with us our good friend Gardner Scott. Gardner Scott was joining with us. It was the second weekend of the month, and everybody knows on the second weekend of the month we like to get together with our good friend Gardner Scott, and he answers all of your gardening questions. We had a great Q&A with Gardner Scott last Sunday. Really great show. And also too, if you didn't get a chance to check out yesterday's show too, because remember, we are here every Saturday and Sunday at 11 p.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern. And I do actually want to make sure I throw out this caveat for everybody, as I mentioned yesterday as well too. I do say every Saturday and Sunday, but every now and then it's not every Saturday and Sunday. And that'll be the case next Sunday as well too, as I got to take a personal day. So I won't be here for the show next Sunday, but we will have a show next Saturday. We'll talk a little bit about that here in just a little bit as well too. But yesterday on our show, we had with us Andre Baptiste from Andre the Farmer, talking all about all of the things that he's got growing on over in his Florida garden and food forest and all of that as well too, and talked a little bit about some hot sauce that he makes as well from peppers and all the things that he grows in his garden. So really great conversation with him. And also too, we got to talk with Jay Tracy from the Cucumber Shop. We talked about all sorts of cool exotic cucumbers and different varieties of these cucumbers he grows, as well as these melons that he grows like their cucumbers, which I thought was really interesting. I'm hopefully going to get some seeds from them here so I can grow some of those out this year and give them a try, because everybody knows I really love cucumbers. And as we talked about yesterday with Jay too, and everybody knows who watches the show here, is that cucumbers are basically how all of this garden adventure started for me. So I really look forward to maybe growing some of Jay's cucumbers that he grows there at Cucumber Shop. You want to go back and check that out if you didn't get a chance to check out that conversation, as well as check out the links too. Like I say, there's always great links to our guests in the description. You'll find a link in yesterday's description to the Cucumber Shop where you can go and order some of those really cool exotic cucumbers that Jay's been collecting over the years. You'll definitely want to go and check that out for sure. So right on, everybody. And again, too, one of the great things about doing this Sunday book club that we're doing here every third Sunday of the month is I get to hang out with one of my really good friends that I've gotten to know here through the Urban Gardener channel. And luckily, we do still got him today. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But right on. I think it's a little about time that we get in the garden with our good friend NBC. All right, everybody. Let's welcome our good friend, Mark Boucher Coubert, Mr. NBC in the garden.
In the garden, well, yeah, out of the bed is actually the more like it today. I was in the bed yesterday with flu, so I just made it today. I woke up and I'm like, all right, I'm feeling better than I did yesterday, so that's good.
I know, and I got that message from you yesterday. I was like, oh no, I hope he doesn't leave me all solo for the book club this year.
I mean,
but then I sat there and I thought about it. I was like, you know what? There is no way Mark Rocher Colbert isn't going to make it to this book club. That's for sure.
Well, this brings me back to one of our first episodes that we ever did together.
Oh, yes.
About seeds. And you had driven all the way up from Medford up to Portland, and I had come home from work, I think, that day, and I was feeling terrible. I could just feel it coming on. This is the same thing that came on this time. Friday, yesterday I went to school. Friday I went to school. By the end of the day, I was like, uh-oh, I'm going down. Well, that night you were coming up, same thing. I was like, had a pretty normal day, but then I got home. I was like, uh-oh, I'm going down. It's like, Enoch's coming. He's already halfway up here. I can't cancel out. So I remember we were upstairs in an upstairs room, and you were setting up your lights and camera. I was literally horizontal. I'm like, just get me up when it's time for the interview.
It was so funny too, because like I said, I set up everything. I got the lights and the camera, and I was doing that as you were just completely laid out. Yeah. And I got everything set up, and I was like, oh, do I, because you were just out, and I was like, oh man, I gotta wake him up now. So I'm over there tapping on, hey Mark, let's you want to do this interview? Can you do it? And you popped up like that. It was just something else. I couldn't believe it.
It must have been the magic of seeds, because it's like I got animated for an hour, and then I think right after that, man, I went right back to horizontal.
Exactly. We ended up having a really great conversation. Really,
we did actually. It was really good.
Yeah, it was, but it was risky business for me too, because you warned me ahead of time, but I was like, I just traveled all the way up here. I still got to do it. So I ended up having to come home and deal with that cold or flu or whatever it was for the next week or two myself.
Oh yeah, you got it too. Oh God, sorry. Well, at least we're digital right now. I can't pass you anything here. We're safe and secure.
Yeah, it goes to show you what some of us will do for content. That's for sure.
Right, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, these just these monthly garden book groups have gotten so important to me. It's like, man, I would have to be hit by a Mack truck to miss one of these because they're just so fun, so enlightening, and I really love these opportunities to talk with authors about their really thought provoking. They're garden lovers, and they're
Mm.
taking us to another level each time. So I really enjoy that and love doing it with you. So here I
Yeah,
am.
yeah. It's gonna be again another great book club for us. We've had so many already, and this is just kind of my frame of thinking too. Is like, this has been going so well, we've been doing so good, and you have so much fun doing it. I was like, there's no way Mark's gonna miss out, especially after such a great book that we got to read this last month too. So really looking forward to talking with Kim here in just a little bit all about this book. But what do we got going on in the garden, Mark? I mean, again, too, as everybody knows, Mark's a garden educator and teaches gardening to all groups of grade school kids, and
Yep. Yep.
as well as, you're a head gardener for the Noble Rot, which is a rooftop garden in Portland for a really cool restaurant there in downtown Portland, as well as a lot of your own urban gardening around your house and everything. You got some really cool front yard, side yard gardens as well too. So tell us a little bit about what's been going on in your gardens.
Well, I'm sort of lamenting the loss of some space in my grow room because I've been
Mm,
growing a lot of my salad ingredients for the winter, and I've kind of got my last lettuce, my little gems, those little baby romaines coming on into the grow lights. I've been cranking out pea shoots, dwarf gray sugar pea shoots. That's my go-to, and just making some endives, incredible salads all through the winter. Um, and just like now that my start, I got peppers and tomatoes coming on, so pretty soon those are going to need to be divided, and it's going
mhm.
to take over all my light space. So I'm right at that weird space where it's like I've had this huge supply of lettuce all winter, and now I'm going to start relying on what's outside. But it's going to be about a month, I think, where I don't really have a lot of lettuce. So that's sad, too bad, because
Right.
my grow room has been pumping stuff out like crazy. That's been so fun. But like I
Yeah.
said, time for tomatoes, time for peppers. Got a lot of those. I think I planted about 30 kinds of tomatoes at school, which is always fun. We do a tomato sale. So a lot of different varieties, some old favorites. Um, this year I got a couple of I met this cool farmer, Wild Dreams Farm and Seed. Her name's Jennifer Williams at the Flower and Garden Show up in Seattle. Bought some new tomato varieties from her,
Oh, that's
and she actually told me an interesting story. I was mentioning to her, it's like, oh, I do this book group, and we just interviewed this really interesting person, Jennifer Jewell, last time about seeds. I really recommend her book to you. And she said, oh, Jennifer Jewell came out to my farm and did a whole episode
oh
on her NPR podcast on my farm. So I'm like, oh my gosh, Jennifer,
wow,
that's amazing.
that's
So
great.
yeah, that was really fun. I'm still coming off the Flower and Garden Show. I tell you, that was just a month, almost
Oh,
a
it's
little
so
less
much
than a
fun.
month ago. Still processing the inspirations. I did get to meet Kim Stoddart there at the Flower and Garden Show, which was amazing. I met her in
Yeah,
person for a few minutes, so that
that's
was really
great.
fun. Yeah. What else is going on in the garden? Well, we just maybe with Kim's inspiration here, looking through some of the pictures in this book, I had a bunch of old pallets hanging around,
Mm,
and we kind of waterproofed one up with non-toxic wood preservative. This is at school with kids, and we've made it into a planter. So I'm starting to plant it from the lower levels up, and I keep bringing some more soil every week, and we go another level. I've got lettuce and chives, so maybe I'll have a few pictures for you for the next time. It'll be fully planted by next month, and
yeah.
that feels really fun, like in the spirit of resilience, like just reclaiming some old stuff that would just
Yeah.
get tossed into the waste stream, and showing
Mhm.
the kids how to make a really cool looking planter out of it, and looking forward to actually getting a harvest from that. I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, that'll be a really great experiment for them as well too. And
Yeah,
kids really like that sort of thing of building things up and doing that sort of thing, and then being able to do that again by reutilizing things and showing them that as well as part of the lesson is just really great.
I think some of these things, I'm a big guy on lateral thinking. Like I think sometimes it's not like the Flower and Garden Show is a good example of this. It's not always, you go there, you see a lot of stuff. It's not like you're going to go back home and reproduce exactly the same thing, but you may get an idea from there that fits your life. So that's what I'm hoping for with the kids. Like they see this pallet planter. It's not like they're going to go make pallet planters. Maybe they will, but maybe they won't. Maybe they'll reuse something else. But it just gives them the freedom to think about reusing and being creative with materials in the garden. So that's kind of what the object is.
Yeah, that's great. That'll be a fun experiment. I've been wanting to build one of those kind of pallet type planters as well too. One very similar to the one that she has pictured in the book too. So like kind of a wall one you could set up or something. I think would be kind of cool.
That's cool. I mean, using things to make living walls off of building surfaces has always been an interest of mine. And I have that living fence in my backyard where basically it's some big beams, two faces of the fence, and then the inside is a soil core. It's all soil inside, and then there's little kind of louvered slats where you can plant stuff. It's fun. That's cool.
Yeah, I really like the wall ideas and everything. And you never know, in some small space gardens, and that might be all somebody has is some sort of a south-facing wall somewhere, and build something up, find ways to grow in that sort of situation is really great. And there's a lot of really cool stuff you can grow, especially one of the things is like lettuces. You can grow those in just almost any kind of container. They're so easy to grow in smaller setups like that, and you can get a lot of food out of something like that. And even with one of those wall things, create a rotation and everything, and be able to have a good supply of your own greens just coming right off of a wall. So there's a lot, lots of great ideas when it comes to that stuff. And I really like the idea of repurposing things, because that's a lot of what I do as well too with my garden spaces.
Yeah, here's another thing we've been working on too, is our dryland farming, which I think will also be in line with today. So we've got a patch at school that's far away from our other gardens. So it would take lots of hauling hoses to get out there to water things. So we just decided we're going dryland, which means no supplemental water, only what's stored in the soil based on the rain. And in our area, we get a seasonal drought from about July 1st, we'll say. Sometimes it's a little earlier, sometimes a little later, to about mid-October. So pretty much no rain through that period. And so using this technique of dryland farming, where you space crops far apart, and you either mulch or keep the surface weed free. We've had some great luck with some varieties of tomatoes that we've done out there, and just like the cherries especially are just like abundant. So we're going to try potatoes this year. Russian banana was indicated as being drought tolerant, so I'm going to try that fingerling. We're going to try some Hopi corn, which obviously the southwestern traditional native farmers have done this for generations, because they don't have a lot of moisture, and yet they're still able to grow corn using these wide spacings. And then we're going to try some melons too. So this year is going to be fun. We're expanding beyond tomatoes. We're going to try 4 different crops in the dryland: potatoes, corn, tomatoes, and melons. And so should have a lot to report back as the season goes on about that.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to see how all of that grows. I remember when you were first getting that experiment started, when I came to visit that last time to the school. So it's kind of cool to see it's kind of really advancing along really well.
Yeah, many years back, I did some experiments with it when I used to run a farm called Zenger Farm, Urban Bounty Farm at Zenger Farm in Portland, and got some amazing results. I mean, you can do a lot of things. I remember some Brussels sprouts, some kale that was just amazing. Dryland, no additional water. So there's a lot that can be done. We'll probably talk with Kim about that today, because she's definitely referenced some things like that in her book as well. But it's fun to, again, like I tell the kids, hey, we're going into a future with a lot less certainty in terms of water, and we are going to need to save it for other things, So if it falls from the sky and is stored in the soil, let's use what's there.
Yeah, yeah, and we've got to get better and better at it too. It's just, it's really a requirement as we move forward towards the future. It's not something that we're just, looking and anticipating. We know what's happening here, and it's time to start figuring these sort of things out. So that's why we're digging into this really great book
Yep.
today. We got
Got
the
to get
climate
gardens
change
resilient.
resilient garden. We're really looking forward to talking to Kim here in just a few minutes. And well, thanks for the update there in the gardens there and everything. We do look forward to hearing about all these. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Here we go.
Enoch, you're the one. You thought I wasn't going to be
Can
making the
you hear
show.
me?
Look like you're not making the show. Yeah, I can hear you. There you go.
Ah, okay. This thing, I swear, I tell you, at least it's not dropping me completely. Let's hope it doesn't.
You got to,
You might be hosting this show all by yourself, Mark.
you and I got one thing in common, Enoch. We both have a virus, except yours is in the computer somewhere.
I know, I know. Oh my, oh my. All right, all right. Well, let's take a real quick break here, Mark. We'll get right back here at it in just a second here, and we'll get started with our monthly gardening book club.
Can't wait. See you then.
All right. Hey, gardeners, thanks for tuning in to our show today. We'll be right back at it here in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second here to highlight our regular videos and features here on the Urban Gardener channel. Our weekly garden journals, and our incredible featured visits. All right, all right. Here we are. Here we are.
Back again.
What number is it? This is our 10th
Number 10.
book club, right? Isn't
Number-
that the number we figured out? 10th book club so far. And we've got another really, really great book for everybody this week that we're talking about, or this month that we're talking about. It's Kim Stoddart's Climate Change Resilient Vegetable Garden. So yeah, this book's full of some really great stuff, man. I'm telling you, lots and lots of just different things to be thinking about, different ways of looking at our gardens through the through the lens of our changing climate.
Yeah, nice. It's a nice book. It's nice to hold. It's got a lot of photos. I was like a garden book with a lot of photos because you get a lot from the images. I got to say, there's drawings, there's diagrams, and there's images. And when I get a book like this in my hands, I kind of go through it and just look at the pictures first. I almost like read the picture part of the book.
Yeah.
Then that gives me a lot of. So I really appreciate that about this book. There's just good. It's multimedia, let's say, in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. And you were sharing too the other day on your social media too, the fun little graphs that
Yeah.
I like that. It's this one here's the make compost, where everything leads you to making compost. I love it. It's great.
Yeah, there's like
or
play
digging
with
in the
soil.
soil. Yep.
Soil, yeah, those are fun. Exactly.
Exactly. Really great book. Lots of great stuff. So tell me what's your overall take here?
Well, some great one. I was talking to you before is that there's a kind of anti-consumerist thread throughout it all, and I really appreciate that. There's this sense of like, if to make our gardens more resilient, we have to be more resilient in a lot of ways, and the impulse to just click and buy is got to go. In a lot of ways, it's like you got to learn how to fix, you got to learn how to repair, you got to learn how to save seeds. You got to learn how to make your own compost. That just resonates 100%. And then the other thing I think she mentions is not just an individual effort. It's like getting into community with people who also value that stuff, doing it together, doing the seed swaps, doing the old timey
Hmm.
stuff. It's just like we got to get back to that. We got
Yeah,
soft. We got handed a lifestyle that we didn't even know where it was coming from, and now the bills come and due. So
that's
to me,
right.
it's like this sense of self-reliance that makes the garden resilient. There's those two things go really together, I think.
Yeah, that's very true. And kind of like I was saying earlier too, it's really gardeners too. Us gardeners who are out there and we're trying to grow food or we're trying to grow things. We really, really can feel the effects of climate change,
Oh
through
yeah. Oh
our
my God.
own practices and everything.
Yeah, we're just seeing it. There's a term in science called phenology, I think, phenology, and
Yeah.
it's the appearance of things along the time of the year. And certain things come up early and earlier. There's no arguing with that. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, the bloom times are earlier and earlier for so many different things. It's like plants
Hmm.
are telling us loud and clear that changes are happening.
Yeah, yeah. And like for me though too is even like I was saying, intensity. I mean,
Yes.
like heat intensity is just
Yeah.
just getting more and more here for where I live in the Southern Oregon Rogue Valley. In this valley, it's just hotter and hotter, and we're getting more and more week or days of that are above 100, and they're stacking on each other more and more so every summer. So
Oh,
there's just a lot of stuff that we're really feeling. And then again, too, and as you know as well, because we're both on the West Coast, we deal with a lot of wildfire issues as
yes.
well too, which are a direct cause of a lot of this as well. So there's a lot of things that we can tell that things are really at kind of a real kind of climax, a real kind of like this is do or die. You got to start doing something now, or right.
Yeah, we gotta make changes. Luckily, as gardeners,
Hopefully us gardeners we can lead the way, maybe.
we're on the front lines. I mean, we are, uh, in terms of getting the food system to be more resilient and local, we're right there. We are, working with composting and recycling
Mhm.
nutrients. So there's a lot of things we're already doing that are helpful to the ecosystem, that are beneficial. But we have to acknowledge that a lot of gardeners have been sold a bill of goods there too, in terms of all the pesticides and herbicides, and we got to kick the habit of all that and return to much more natural ways,
Yep.
because otherwise we're just as bad. We're leading
Yeah.
to doom and ruin as well. So
Yep. Yeah.
yeah, there's just a
That
lot
and
of
a
things
lot
to.
of products as well too, things that we just don't need to use in our garden that we feel like we need to buy and have in our garden. There's a lot of that as well. Consumerism, as you touched on before. So well, you know
Plastic.
what, let's dig into it. We've got a really amazing author with us here today to talk all about her book, so let's get started. Let's
Let's
get
do
this
it.
book. Let's do the book club. All right, Mark. Let's welcome to the show Kim Stoddart,
Hey, Kim.
author of The Climate
How are you?
Resilient Garden. Thank you so much for joining with us today. How are you doing over there?
It's my pleasure to be here. I'm really good. Thank you. Your show's brilliant. It's really good to be on your show.
Oh, well, excellent. Thank you so much. It's
So
really,
nice.
really great to have you here.
Yeah, it was great to meet you in person, Kim. That red hair was my beacon. I I
I
you know, I,
know.
I looked out over the
Yeah,
sea of people at the Northwest Flower Garden Show. I saw that brilliant red hair. I was like, there's Kim Stoddart. I gotta go
it
see
is
her.
quite distinct. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to grow out of it and having it in pigtails as well. So, but I enjoy it. It's fun.
You
So
see,
thank
I
you. No, it's so nice to catch up in
you
person.
see, I wore my red hat in tribute.
Enix sporting the red on top too. I'm the only one with a substantial lack of color. Sorry about that.
So wonderful. All right.
Uh,
Well, here, real quick, though, I want to give you a minute here, Kim, maybe to introduce
Hmm.
yourself to everybody there. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, and, and kind of how we got to writing this really great book.
Thank you. Well, I have a background as an entrepreneur, and I'm from Brighton, which is the southeast of the UK in England. And I used to run PR companies, and so I used to work for big brands. I sold my businesses. It was about coming up 16 years ago, and I wanted to move my love of gardening into a career. And one of the first things I did was, having worked for lots of big brands and promoting them, wondered why we were so reliant on buying everything in from a gardening perspective, as you mentioned earlier. So I did this experiment to see if I could garden for free for the Guardian newspaper, and it was very ambitious. I like a challenge. So as the title suggests, I attempted to garden entirely for free, and I had to take the so-called traditioning rule book for gardening and just very politely put it to one side and figure out how I was going to do this, and channel the thrifty peasant gardeners of yore, and just, you know, find out how I could make mend and do my way through it. So I do buy things in now, but this approach really informed everything that I do now, and it's the beating heart of the book as well. So it's the beating heart of the book, and I've done a lot of training over the years, and I've done a lot of hands-on community growing projects and working with people. And since the pandemic, I've been using a lot of techniques that I would use just for people that were sort of struggling from mental health capacity. So I do a lot of the well-being work, I do a lot of the resilience building, and it just led me really to this conclusion that it is, as you mentioned earlier as well, it's about building resilience internally. So it's about that, as well as the actual savvy on the ground solutions. So all of this comes together in the book, and it's been described as a self-help guide for the future, which I think is really nice. And it's about giving people hope as well, because there are solutions, there are ways that you can make a difference. And so I also edit the world's oldest gardening magazine, consumer gardening magazine, Amateur Gardening. And it's just, I feel everything that I do is really very much being on a mission just to help gardeners cope with the changes that are happening to our climate, but to do so in a very upbeat way, I hope.
Yeah, because we do kind of need that kind of inspiration.
Yeah, you mentioned that word hope a lot in your book, so it kind of rang through. This is something positive that we're doing. You know, we're confronting something really dark, but it's still, there's still a light that we can generate in our own gardens and our own inside of ourselves.
Absolutely, because a lot of the time gardening's been really overcomplicated in the past, and there's this need to, or this perception that you have to spend a lot of money buying products in, but also that you have to spend a lot of time on the garden itself. So through my experiences over the years debunking that, it just goes to show that actually if you work in line with the natural world, there is no quick fix. But there are lots of ways that you can, say, make, mend and do, like you were talking before about using pallets, using waste materials, so you can save money. But by, for example, making the soil the best it can be, using techniques like no-till, also building up the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil. There's all sorts of things you can do that actually make gardening a lot easier to work with and a lot more fun. And I feel it's very, very important as well for us to actually have these spaces, these precious outside spaces for ourselves as well. So if we're spending our time running around feeling guilty with very long exacting to-do lists, then we're not using it in a way that we could, which is actually incredibly good for us as well as for the planet, because we're working in line with nature, we're saving money, we're putting food on the table. So it's just sort of changing the way that we look at all of this and making it something that is more, it's more effective for person, plate and planet.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really appreciate about the book as well too, is taking that kind of full circle look at things in a way too, you know, is from our techniques and what we do in the garden to also one of the things we talk a lot about too, especially on this show as well, is about the effects of gardening on us in a sense of you know, how we feel about things, you know, and what it makes us, you know, how a garden can inspire us in a way too. So there's kind of that full circle look, because you know, when we're talking about climate effects and changes, as we were touching on earlier, you know, here where I live, you know, just these hotter summers, wildfires, all these sort of things can bring this overwhelming sense of dread about what's
It's
going
stressful.
on and what are, you know, where is this leading to and all of that sort of thing. But kind of as I was talking about there as well was that, maybe it's us gardeners who can help kind of lead the way in this, because we're really kind of at the ground level looking at what are ways that we can, or ways and things that we can do to resist this or be resilient, as you're talking about in the book. And that just kind of brings it around in a full circle. We can utilize these sort of things we get from the garden and our practices as gardeners to start making effective change to move forward, and then
Absolutely.
again, building community to help other gardeners find these solutions as well.
It's so true. And I've written for the Lancet in the UK, which is, it's academic publication for the medical industry. And I've written previously, because my younger son has autism, I've written about the benefits of gardening for purposes of emotional regulation. So all of this lends itself incredibly well to gardening. And I think one of the things I've been talking about recently with Amateur Gardening magazine is little acts of kindness, reaching out to others this year. So whether it's actually passing on some spare plants, so, sowing some extra seed, taking some cuttings, things that you can do to try and connect with people, I think that's a really positive action. And gardening is, obviously we're biased because we're gardeners. We know how fantastic it is to nurture seed into food, into plants, into food that you can bring to the table. It feels so incredibly good. No matter what's happening outside, it feels so incredibly to do that, to try and share that love with others and to try and encourage people. Just feels really, really special. But also to make time to try and garden, even if it's only for a small amount of time every day, if you can, a few times a week, where it's completely guilt-free. So I know it's the beginning of the growing season. We're all getting excited about germinating our tomatoes and aubergines and peppers, but to try and garden in a way that is nurturing for us, if it's just, mindfulness, walking around, picking a few leaves, just, touching, playing with compost, just taking time out. This is actually incredibly good for us, and it helps us to emotionally regulate. It helps us feel good, but it also helps us to problem solve, because you're tapping into the prefrontal cortex in your brain, which is where executive decision making is made. So it's really good excuse to say, if anyone says, why aren't you gardening? Why aren't you working? Just, give them this basically, because there is a scientific reason why it's actually incredibly good for us just to try and be, at least for a little bit of time, because it will help us problem solve around whatever challenge there might be in the garden with extreme weather.
Well, there's this kind of British word that Americans don't use too much, but we read it every once in a while. But I think it's perfect in terms of like puttering. It's like this sense that you're out there working, but it doesn't have a real, like, it's not competitive. It's not time regulated. It's just kind of enjoying the work for the work's sake. You're out there kind of, you're getting some stuff done, but tell me what you understand that word to mean, puttering.
It's a great word, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just, I wonder what the origins actually of that word are. I suppose maybe it involves pots in some way, but it is literally just thinking. It's thinking. There's, having worked with a group of, I've previously said, run projects with young autistic adults, and there's the techniques you can use where you walk, you use movement to slow yourself down, you're walking around, you're tuning in, those type of things. But since the pandemic, with the courses I do, I've been using that for everybody. So pottering is really, it's exactly that. It's just not feeling the pressure to do anything in that moment and just soaking it in. So sometimes if you are having a stressful day, busy with work, had an argument with a friend, family, partner, whatever it might be, whatever's going on in your brain, just sometimes you can't just walk in the garden and just be. So techniques like pottering, as you said, that's my word of the day, actually. I love that word. So walking around, tuning in, it could be looking at birds, looking at garden birds, maybe picking a few salad leaves, maybe some light weeding, all helps you to come out of your head and connect with the ground and to leave that behind slowly but surely. It's an incredibly beneficial thing to do. It's so enjoyable. We feel so much pressure, don't we, on a daily basis? And also with our lives now, there's alongside pressures from a gardening perspective to feel that you have to buy lots of things. There's
Yeah.
also the pressure as well to take photographs and to keep checking your phone. So, you know,
Yes.
it's enjoyable to feel connected, but it's also good to leave that aside, at least for a time, and just enjoy the natural world and your space as is.
Yes, good. That's a great reminder, because there's so much Instagrammable, Facebookable, this sort of thing. Temptations in the garden, you know, and it's fine to do that, but it's also fine to just say, hey, I'm not even taking my phone. I'm just going out there for the pure pleasure, just to be a relaxed human being right now.
Yeah, I feel
Absolutely.
that same well, I mean, for me, you know, having a camera out in the garden with me and doing all that sort of stuff is really a part of, you know, what I do as far as creating gardening content and all of that. So really, you know, it is kind of, you know, an essential part of what I do as far as putting together this channel, The Urban Gardener, and all that sort of stuff. But I too still have to set that phone aside, set that camera aside. I have to take time for myself to appreciate my garden spaces, you know, from a, you know, a real personal and perspective, you know, and relationship with my garden spaces that you, like you mentioned in the book, you can't really do when you're just so tuned into what am I doing for social media? What am I doing for my Instagram? Or how does this look? You know, how do I get the best picture of this? Just to sit back and appreciate your garden space for what it is and what you've made it into.
Absolutely. And you know, it makes you more effective as well. It actually, to take that time out, you could actually, the way I quantify it is to say that it's thinking time if I need an excuse. So if you are, so say if I'm, you know, at my computer, which I am a lot because I edit amateur gardening magazine. So, but to actually step away from that, if I'm thinking about the central thrust of an article that I need to write, or there's something that I'm doing, to step away and then do this, have some time pottering, it's that word again, come back, it makes you more effective at what you do. So it all feeds in. It's calming your brain. Your brain is working behind the scenes for you. It's actually coming up with solutions if you give it that space to let those ideas flow through.
Yeah, the downtime, and especially linked to nature, right? Get all that stuff going. Kim,
Absolutely.
you made a big move in your life from Brighton, England to sounds like coastal Wales or something.
It
Tell
is, yes.
tell us about that, and tell us about setting up your garden there. And it sounds like you've been contending with lots of challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I call it the Wild West of Wales. So it's about 750 foot or thereabouts above sea level in a place called Ceredigion, which is very, very remote. So I travel quite a lot with my work, but I moved from a city to a very rural location on a homestead. So I went from a very small garden where I just grew edibles in sort of vertical growing, lots of hanging baskets, also a few pots. So I went from that sort of scenario to 2.3 acre homestead. So I've got my training gardens here. So I've got all sorts of different types of garden within the garden. I did the whole self-sufficiency thrust as well when I first moved. So having done that, then I decided that I just wanted to focus on the gardening side of things. You know, you learn through doing. I'm the sort of person that if I want to learn something, I immerse myself in it completely because I need to understand it. And then I can say, no, I don't want to do that. No, that doesn't make sense. So, but I've got context. I understand why. So yeah, and because it's a homestead, where I live, there's a private water supply. So the water supply has run almost completely dry during periods of drought, which we've had most years since 2018, which means that there is literally no water coming out the tap in the house.
Wow.
So that's, that there's no really surefire indicator of the on the ground impact of climate change when you go and turn on the tap and there's nothing coming out. So that, of course, has been material, which means that these techniques of dry methods of gardening have been tested to the limit as well. So ever the optimist, that's how I'm framing that. And then also the garden's flooded as well. So They flooded when a neighbour's field, a farmer at the back of the gardens, it was a grass livestock field. It was used for sheep grazing, and it was actually turned over. And it was ploughed for basically some kind of arable crop, and then the gardens flooded. There was a lot of rain, and the gardens flooded. So that really took me on this journey of understanding about techniques around no-till. So it's all been a fantastic learning curve, obviously a bit stressful at times, but it has informed the approach that I take and the research that I've been doing into methods from all around the world that can actually help to build resilience as well, and being prepared for anything when it comes to the weather and extremes.
Yeah, so this book is really coming out of your own experience with some very challenging circumstances in gardening.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine
Absolutely.
the whole turning on a tap and not having water come out, and I know that's something us here again on the West Coast of the United States, or we're looking at a lot of this sort of stuff as well too, especially those of us who are a bit more south. I mean, here in Southern Oregon, California, in these areas, there's a lot of talk about where we're going when it comes to water, and the availability of water, who has the rights to the water. All this sort of stuff is going on right now, is that people are really fearing that moment, that the taps aren't going to start running dry.
Well, the thing is, we live in a world, a society where we're just so used to having whatever we want at any given opportunity, where we can just, there's 24/7 opportunities just to shop and to buy things. But it was really that central thrust of what we were talking about earlier that I just couldn't help but feel, what happens if we didn't have that? When you're so reliant, and even if you are not reliant on buying in completely everything, that just gives you so much confidence and self-empowerment. It just feels so incredibly good to know that actually I don't have to buy that in. I've made this. And if you're having a day, if you're feeling stressed about something, taking a old item, something that would otherwise have gone to landfill, and trying to find some sort of positive use for it, it's just amazing. It builds confidence in yourself. And it just feels, it's not a quick fix solution for the world and for climate change, but it can, all these little actions, these little positive actions all add up. And they can make you feel that it's okay in that moment. I can do this. Look what I've done. It might be a bit ramshackle, but you made it. You made it. I mean, I'm not a DIY expert in any way, shape, or form, but I love taking something that would otherwise be taken to landfill and trying to think of some positive use for it. It's an incredibly empowering thing to do.
Yeah, well, I was telling Enoch about our pallet planter that we made at school, largely inspired by seeing that image in your book. And, I'd seen other ones before, but sometimes I tell you, it's just even an image can prompt us, or even a conversation can prompt us to make the move. Like, I had never done that before. And then all of a sudden I saw that picture in your book. I was in the mind of thinking about reuse from reading your book. And it's just like, gosh darn it, I'm doing it right now. Let's just do it. Let's make this happen.
No, that's brilliant.
Yeah, for me, and again too, there, and it's in some places, the idea also, and more plastic and all of that, and all of this stuff has been kind of something that's consumed my mind for a while. And I worked for a place where they had all these buckets, right? Just plastic, all these big plastic buckets, but all they're doing is they're just tossing them away, and they're just getting thrown away and thrown away. And constantly I'm like, what is going on here? And I just couldn't take it anymore. I'm like, these have got to have some other use. You've got to be able to do something to instead of just tossing them. And even though I didn't really like the idea of plastic at the time, I was like, we've got to do something more with these, so it became my own little personal mission to figure it out. And that's when I discovered the earth buckets that we utilize here in my gardens, and are probably a big thing that I show on my channel. And that came from that sort of sense of like, what can I do to stop this from going and being wasted, and reuse it and find a way that could, and again, too, touching on how do I pull expenses from my garden too, because of gardening can be expensive for a lot of new gardeners as they see all these pots and products and stuff out there. Well, if we start looking at, you know, reusing things and finding ways to do stuff with certain things, then we can find solutions to certain things. And this earth bucket thing became another solution to drought and high heat and things that we were doing. So I found it to be like a multi-use reuse of something too. So, you know, I think that's really important as we're looking in our garden spaces as well, is to find those things like you're talking about in the book that we can use and reuse and recycle and start getting those, what, the 3 R's or whatever the R's were that we started learning when we were younger, and really put that into play in our garden spaces today.
It's this idea of plastic being single use, isn't it? You know, I think if
it's what the
plastic's
problem
already
is.
in circulation, then why not just try and find another use for it, like you've done, which is a brilliant example. I mean, last week my hose pipe got a leak. So it had a leak in the hose pipe. It was quite a bad leak. I think one of my cats decided to bite it or something. I'm not quite, that's my detective work as to what happens. So I don't want to, you know, you could use it potentially to water plants. I could maybe have used it like an on the ground sprinkler system and made some more holes in it, but I've already got one of those for the hoop tunnels. So what I decided to do instead, and this is so ramshackle, is I got some plastic wrapper from food, and I just wrapped it around the outside of the hose, and I just got some garden string and then just tied it really tightly, and it worked. So it doesn't look very attractive, but how, you know, again, that's another example of just very simple 5-minute job, problem solving. How can I keep that hose pipe in use rather than having to get rid of it? So little things like that. Obviously, you're not going to win any design awards for how that looks, but it works. So job done.
Yeah, exactly. And another one though too is I don't like buying new hoses either, and a lot of times the hoses will end up having that break or something that's actually more closer to the end, and you can always repair these hoses too. They got a little simple piece you can go get. You just cut that little break on and then stick a new piece on the end of it, tighten it up, and now you got, you know, you can keep using that same old hose that you had. It's just a little shorter than it was before.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is it, isn't it? Just, you know,
Repair, another R, right?
Yeah.
Repair.
Absolutely. And it's when you're so used to buying everything in, it can be difficult to think like that. It's that idea. And I was very much in that cycle when I was in Brighton of thinking something's broken, quick, you know, online, order something else, and it's there the next day pretty much. But you feel that there's a sense of slight helplessness with that it's just, you know, you're reliant, you're almost addicted to replacing things. And this idea of gardening being so expensive was a real push button for me. And I've done all sorts of different projects over the years, and I've done lots of different training. And one example I think comes forward on this occasion is that a lot of people think that to create a sensory garden in a school, it's going to cost a huge amount of money. But, you know, I've had these conversations with local education authorities in my area where, you know, to create a sensory garden, arguably, you just need to get the pupils involved, and you can start on a very basic level. It's this idea that in order to do something, there can be all these barriers in terms of cost, or someone starting out an allotment, this idea that they have to have all this equipment to get going, because there's so much stuff you can buy, isn't there, in the gardening world. But actually, if you just make the soil the best it can be, and if you work within your local community with other gardeners, you can do some swapsies, you can get your hand on some new seed, you can take some cuttings. There are so many different ways of doing gardening on a budget, and you get that instant connection with your community and with the things that you're using as well. If you just look after your tools, and if you can swap and exchange, it takes gardening onto a whole new level of enjoyment, I think, as well as also saving a great deal of money.
Yeah.
That's
Real
awesome.
quick, Mark, real quick. I just wanted to kind of caveat that and say that too, that, you know, is again, this point of consumerism, you know, and this is something that we have all just kind of been, you know, brought up and developed into throughout our lives, is this sense of consumerism. So when we think of gardening, or a new person who hasn't gardened before thinks of gardening, they think of products. right? Because we're a consumer set mind. And so when they think of, so they look at the garden space and they go, well, I need this, and then I'm going to need this, and then I'm going to need this, I'm going to need this. And this is what's going to get me started gardening. Because we all kind of take this consumer look at things. And I think that's one of the great points is to kind of remove that, pull that back and show people that, wait a minute, gardening doesn't need all of that stuff.
It's thinking about what gardeners used to do. What did people do in the past? And that was the thing for me, was to think, how did we used to do this? I mean, in the UK, there's a lot of there's been a lot of research and thrust forward with peat-free compost,
Right.
for example. So there's been lots of sort of challenges over the quality of the compost, but actually peat itself is only a relatively recent ingredient in compost.
Yeah.
So, if you look back, how did people used to do this? I'm not suggesting it was all picture perfect, but, this idea of, making an item last, be it a garden tool, looking after it, repairing it, swapping, seed saving. You don't want to seed save from everything. Believe me, I've tried, and it was really hard work. So I know, I've tried, but if you save seed from, say, for example, a cabbage, then that's more complicated. It's an outbreeder crop, so it's more complicated to do. But you will get so much seed from that 1 year seed saving that you can pass that around to other people, and people used to exchange and barter. And there's so much fun to be had with doing some swaps and exchange. It's a really good conversation starter as well. I mean, obviously, if it's something like cucumbers, something like courgettes, there's a joke, obviously, that, come the summer, people don't want your courgettes. There are certain things that can be, there's so much of them that you don't want to give them away.
Yeah.
But in an appropriate way, to actually swap and exchange and to reach out just feels really good. It feels like, again, one small thing, but a positive solution with everything.
Kim, I want to drill down into some of your garden techniques, because similar to that hose example where you said, it's functional, it saves something, but it may not look that pretty. You're talking about growing things in multi-plant beds and polycultures. Tell us a little bit about that and how that bucks some of the common garden wisdom, but how it's really setting a garden up to be more resilient.
Well, when I was experimenting with the writing for The Guardian, one of the things that happened during that time was I had a book that had my crop rotation plan. So, an organic gardening system, you think to crop rotate in order to not get a build-up of pest and disease or to drain the soil of nutrients. And my book got left out in the rain, maybe semi-deliberately, I don't know. And so it was all ruined, but I felt a huge sense of relief because it used to stress me out so much to think, what do I need to do next? Oh, I've just harvested this. What do I put in there? So I was really going against the grain, but I experimented with a small area in my garden. And I just thought, well, surely if I mix plant, polyculture in permaculture circles, I didn't know that at the time. I was just doing what felt right. Surely if I leave a gap between crops of the same type, like tomatoes and potatoes, that would then help with the risk of, say, blight. And then surely if I intercropped, that might work really well. So I just experimented with it, and I felt like I was being really bad. I felt like I was being a really, really badly behaved gardener that always felt slightly guilty that I was doing it. But intuitively, it felt right. It felt right to do this. And I just played with it, and I had such great results with this that I then expanded that to the whole of my my garden space. I've got 2 hoop tunnels, so within there, and I found that it really also helped with natural pest control, because it made it much, much harder for so-called pests to find what they were looking for. So when you've got all these different plants, different layers, different scents, it's much harder for the pest to actually to hone in. So it just made the whole gardening experience a lot easier, and also you can get really creative with it. So it's a bit of a blank canvas, and you can use lots of I love bright colors, and if you can tell with my hair. So for me, a garden that has lots of bright colors, lots of nasturtium, calendula. It's also useful, obviously, it's edible and just generally useful. Mixed in with different plants, it also looked really nice as well as being productive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things too that you talk about here, and I think you touched on just a little bit earlier too, we had Mr. Charles Dowding on the show a couple of weeks back to talk about no-till gardening and all of that. And I think that's one of the things I like about your book, though, too, as well, is that, again, you got the introduction and all that, but when you get into it, you're really starting at the soil level. And everything in the garden is really at the soil level. We're wanting to build really great soil. We're wanting to do that sort of stuff. I believe, and if I'm correct, and I'm not even sure, but I believe soil captures more carbon and all of that than everything else as well, too. So it plays a huge part in climate resilience as well, when it comes to those sort of things. But it really is kind of what we do to enhance our soil, what we do. And again, it also comes back, we don't need all these other products and additives and all that sort of stuff. Composting, the little no-till method, maybe some for me, you touched on it a little bit in the book too. I like I grow my own worms and create my own worm castings and those sort of things so that I can feed my garden that way. But it really all comes down to really how we're caring for our soil first, when it comes to how we are approaching a more climate resilient garden.
It is so true. And the thing is, if you give your plants too many fertilizers, I mean, this is obviously in the ground. If you're growing in a pot, you will need to feed the plants, especially if they're hungry crops. But in the ground, it's this idea that you have to use this, you have to use that, you have to buy these different products and fertilizers. But actually, your plants can then become quite needy of your attention and of the fertilizer. So what they can do is they can actually not push their roots down into the soil as far as they might do otherwise. And so actually by giving them less, by making the soil the best it can possibly be, by using techniques like no-till, you can create plants that will potentially, they'll spread their roots further and deeper into the soil, and they can form these amazing symbiotic relationships with the microbial activity in the soil that can help them find food and water. Also, it means that when you get an extreme weather event, they're more resilient. They're more resilient, they're better able to cope. So if you over pamper your plants, they can become really needy of your attention and less resilient. So there's all sorts of examples around this, and we're only really at the tip of the iceberg in terms of our understanding about soil health. But there is so much natural resilience below ground. And as you said as well, it will also, by using no-till techniques, you're also keeping carbon in the soil. So there are so many benefits to working with that, trying to keep plants growing on for longer. We still have this idea that you grow plants, you grow crops, and then you whip them out, and then you sow the seed and you plant something else. So even something like with lettuce, try and pick and come again as much as you can, or certain brassica can be left in the ground for a number of years if you just cut them back. So I just try and make the best use of everything that comes through the garden. I try and make plants grow on for longer, and I just try and minimize the amount of work that's involved.
Yeah, my eyes bugged out when I saw that you've had a Swiss chard plant growing for 8 years.
Yeah, I know. It's pure experimentation.
That's crazy. So does it, tell me about that plant. Does it bolt? Does it go to seed and then it just continues to leaf from the base, or how does it work?
Yeah, they would. The natural instinct to bolt and then to grow up and then to want to flower and set seed is there. So the likes of the same thing applies particularly with purple sprouting broccoli. So you can do it with that as well. But if you just cut it back, so you just cut it back so it can actually retain its energy in the plant. It doesn't exhaust, because if a plant grows up and it goes to bolt, then it will change the flavor of the chard, for example. Right. So it will change the flavor of the leaves. They'll go quite bitter, which you don't want because that's not nice. But also it will exhaust the plant. So it means it's put all its energy into basically, putting out flowers. So it cannot grow on. So if you cut it back, it can conserve its energy and it can keep growing and producing. So there's all sorts of ways of doing that. And again, this was purely by me playing, as I like to do in the garden, and just pushing the boundaries of what can and can't be done, just to see if something's possible. And I learn new things every year by doing this. Just not, following instructions, just seeing, well, how about if I try this? How about if I grow that in this way? And this is the entrepreneur in me, but this is also I think, childlike enthusiasm in me, is just to make gardening more fun and experimental, but it also makes it more resilient in the process.
Well, I've always agreed with that too, that approach, because the rules can be so helpful at certain times, and yet they can just bind you so much. They after a while you realize you're stuck in a room here with these garden rules, whatever they are, whosever rules they are. And it really limits your experience of the natural world, you and the garden. It's like you can learning directly from your garden, letting it speak to you. So I love that approach, and I do a lot of that too. Just I think it's cool to break the rules and
That's
see
right.
what
It's enjoyable,
In gardening,
isn't it?
rules are almost made to be broken.
Yeah, I think so, and especially with the changing climate as well. And it's no longer seasonality as usual. It's no longer gardening as usual. And the more that we can, like you said, just connect with what works in our own individual area as well, the better that is. So learn from those living around you, use these techniques, play around with it, but also reach out to your community. I think the more that we can also reach out to others, the better that is, because it makes it more enjoyable to feel that we're all in this together, rather than we're there individually in our gardens battling away against this. I mean, I run a community garden near to me in West Wales, and we grow food for local food bank, and that is such an enjoyable project to be involved with. I've got a group of volunteers that work with me. They're really good laugh as well. So it's social, but we do something meaningful with it. So I think where you can, reaching out to others is also an incredibly positive action.
Yes. Yeah. Community is really, really important.
Mm.
We do have a question here. Bohemian Herbology Natural Solutions says, this is extremely interesting. Is there more information in regards to developing resistance in plants in the book? And I just touch on this as well, as I think that's really where parts of the book where you're talking about seed saving really come into play. Because that's one of the things, like I've talked about, say with tomatoes and things that I'm growing, as we're getting more heat in our summers, I'm having to find more heat resilient varieties, or through seed saving, I can also develop varieties that are getting more accustomed and more attuned to the changing climate of my area through multiple generations of saving those different varieties. So you want to touch on that a little bit as you talked about in the book?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of the best things you can do to save some of your own seed from your plants. And it's so exciting because obviously it's saving money, but from a resilience perspective, you can plant breed, like you were saying, which means that you can look to see which plants have performed the best. So if there was a challenging drought that maybe it challenged some of your tomatoes, which tomato varieties did particularly well, which plants did particularly well, save seeds from those. And again, you can look, if it's something like cilantro, if it, don't go for anything that's bolted quickly, don't go for anything that hasn't produced. You want to save seed from the best examples of that crop, because that will help to maintain those good traits that you then want to continue for future generations of plants. So it is such an exciting thing to do. And if you reach out again to local seed swaps in your area, you can find that from other gardeners. And it's also, from a landrace perspective, it's also good to swap with others as well. So there's all sorts of research being done into which varieties of crop are likely to be resilient for the future, which can all get a bit overcomplicated, but ultimately it's how you garden. It's how you garden as well. So look to those in your area. There's probably generations of gardener, Auntie Nora's broad beans, and by actually reaching out and obtaining said example, Auntie Nora's broad beans that do really well, then know that there's also that connection with community and with that person and the legacy of whatever that crop might be. So it doesn't have to be a dedicated name for a type of, say, tomato or broad bean or pea. It could be that it's somebody in your community that's been saving that, and they know that it's actually really resilient in your area. So there's all sorts of extra connections you can get with your crops, as well as making them more resilient for the future. It's really, really exciting, in case you can't tell from the way I'm talking about
I
it.
know. It really is.
Yeah, I think one thing for folks to remember is if you buy your seeds from a seed company, the larger the company, the greater is the tendency for them to buy out from a global seed market. So there's no guarantee that the seeds you're getting have particular resilience for your area. That may be a cause for why things don't do well for people. Whereas if you've been growing your own or getting some from a trusted source nearby or in your region, a smaller seed company and a friend or whatever, those seeds have a lot better chance of succeeding there because they've already been through the adaptive cycle of growing in that area and then being reinforced by saving just the seeds of the plants that did well. So there's a lot there.
Yeah, and I say the same thing with a lot too about, gardening really is best done through a local and community perspective. Your best bet when it comes to getting gardening advice. So what's going to work best in your garden, especially, as with a changing climate, is those gardeners who are local to you, who are working through this, or finding practices in a local way. But at the same time, the seeds as well too, the actual plants and the things we're growing. If you can find varieties that a local gardener has been growing for generations, it's been growing each and every season and adapting each and every year and getting better and better and growing in your area, those are always your best bet. So really, when it comes to gardening, it's great to get advice from all of us on a global level. It's great to to learn more, get inspired and all of that. But if you really, really want to really tune your garden in and make it the best it can be, you really need a good local perspective of what you're doing. And like you said, building the community too around you as well, because it's that local gardening community around you and your garden. They're going to help your garden succeed better and better.
It feels really good. And I think we can all become so, like we were talking about earlier, we can become so focused on, interactions on social media, all these things that are really positive. And also that is a community as well. But to reach out in person is precious. It works really well. One thing I was going to say with seed saving as well is that if you are saving seeds, you can't save from seed that is F1. That's the only exception to that. So because it won't grow true to type. But I mean, that's also why when I wrote the book, it's all about, it's not zone specific in the way that it's written. It's about on the ground solutions that relate to people everywhere, that they can then tailor. And it's building that confidence in yourself to make it your own, in the community that you live in, that resonates across the board, which I think is so important. And it does take gardening onto a whole new level of enjoyment as well. Although we're living through a lot of challenges with the weather, the climate, there are a lot of positives in terms of the way that we can garden around this, especially if we garden together in our communities, wherever they might be.
Kim, can I change the subject and say one word and see what you have to say about it?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about gravel.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Oh my goodness.
Book, and I was like, "Ooh, I got to hear more about this." So let's talk about gravel.
Well, I was inspired by Beth Chatto Gravel Gardens in the UK, that concept of right plant, right place. And I've been experimenting with gravel around, well, actually after my gardens flooded, I used them first of all to create a porous pathway, so porous surface around the raised beds, raising the raised beds up and using gravel so that it was an all-weather space that I could use, so that the water, if there was an excess, a risk of flooding again, it could soak away. Then with the community garden that I've been managing the last few years, it was a building site. it was a building site and there was an awful lot of gravel and rock. So we use that a lot for pathways. I've been experimenting with growing plants in the gravel and also using the stone as an impromptu mulch as well. So using it to help plants as they get established, but also then it protects them from the glare of the sun because it helps to lock moisture in as a mulch. So it encourages spiders, it encourages ground beetles. If you have an issue with slugs, then obviously you've got to be careful, but there are so many benefits to using stone. There are so many ways you can use gravel. It's really, really exciting. And I now use this, I use gravel and stone on pretty much all the gardens that I do, that I'm involved in, because there's so many benefits.
And you're finding you're actually growing herbs and strawberries and certain things very successfully just in pure gravel, right?
Well, they did it themselves. They just did it themselves. So this was nature showing me the way. Again, another perfect example that the strawberries reached out, as they do profusely at the end of the growing season. They will produce runners, and I was just amazed at how they rooted in the gravel, and how actually the strawberries that were growing in the gravel were incredibly productive. They were actually then fruiting earlier than the other strawberries. So they were obviously really enjoying that space. They decided that's where they wanted to grow. And the same with a lot of herbs as well, that they were actually, I mean, the obvious ones like chive, which is really easy to obtain more chive plants for, because it will just readily self-seed. But there's loads of examples. And at the community garden, I'm growing some soft fruits like black currants. I'm growing rosemary. There's a few other herbs that I'm growing actually just directly in the gravel, and they're thriving.
Wow, that's an area I'm definitely going to be working on in my garden. So thanks for that tip.
Yeah, one of the things I found, like strawberries, I have a back patio. It's just a cemented back patio. I have some elevated raised beds in, and I had a couple of strawberry containers. And like you say, the runners just go out and run, and they'll go all over the place trying to find somewhere to go. But they hit the ground on a cement patio, and they just kind of have to roll along because there ain't nowhere to go because it's cement until it finds a crack. And then they will find a crack. And I've had strawberry plants growing out of just the cracks of my cement patio because the runners have found themselves there. And you talk about gravel. I swear, one of my best tomato plants I ever grew volunteered right out of our alleyway gravel. Like literally, I had to like put something around it so people would drive around it because it was almost right in the driving part of the alleyway in the gravel. But it grew so well. That stem and stalk was just hefty, and the plant was really strong, and I was really surprised right out of the gravel. I remember it's on one of my videos a few years ago, but I just couldn't believe that was the case with that too, though. And again, it goes to show you that plants will really find a way, huh?
They do. I know. I suppose we expect that with wildflowers. You think wildflowers they will self-seed where they want to, but we don't think about the same mentality with crops, because we're taught to grow in a dedicated spot, aren't we? So, or in a line or a block. But yeah, if you allow things to self-seed, if you allow nature to show the way, it's amazing. It's amazing what you can find as well. And just to play with that, is it a plant in the right place? Who's to say what the right place is? Why not just see where that plant wants to grow?
Yeah, absolutely. Letting nature teach us, as you said, through your experiments, you try things and then you wait and see what the response is.
Absolutely. It's nature's rule book. If there is a rule book, it's the natural world. So it's, natural world isn't full of straight lines and blocks. And again, it's area specific. So it's fascinating. There's so many solutions to be found just from watching.
Yeah, well, it becomes, like you said, I think a lot of the teaching was that the gardening is an activity that has to be neat and tidy, where we're in control. And as that works to a certain extent, but then it has a lot of problems associated with it. And as we start to let go of that, we can discover some of these new forms that, maybe ancient societies, and actually not that long ago, people have been doing these practices up until some couple of hundred years ago, and modernity's taken us into a different direction. But we return to those, and we have to just find the space in ourselves to allow things to be a little wilder, a little less kempt, a little more, nature looking, and then we get these amazing results.
And it's really fun. It's really fun to forage for food as well.
Yeah.
That's the thing with the polyculture, is that you can almost don a little forager's hat and you go and find your food. If you were obviously a market gardener, that might be quite challenging. You've got to go and hunt down the carrots or whatever it is you're pulling. But it's a really nice low maintenance way of doing it, and it puts that childlike enthusiasm back into gardening. I think so often we are, as we grow older, that we have to be serious. We have to be very serious gardeners. We have to be very well behaved gardeners. But actually, having some fun in the process has a lot to be said for it, and it's also more resilient as well.
Yeah. So true. So true.
Yeah, gardens, again, we talk about rule books, and it's just probably one of the most flexible rule books there are in gardening when it comes down to it, is so we can really experiment and have fun and try new things and do stuff. And that's how we make new discoveries and things that'll help us become better gardeners down the road, is by experimenting and doing that. I did, again, kind of coming back and taking it through here, as I was talking about, we start with the soil, really building up really great soil and that sort of thing, and then we're moving into, and we talked about how your gardens just got all, you're putting things in different places, and kind of being creative with how you're planting and doing these sort of things, which really, if you got good soil, you got good plants, and then you're putting plants around and you're doing things and you're creating some good resistance. And what I'm getting to here is one of the bigger problems a lot of people deal with in the gardening, and one of the bigger questions that starts happening here real soon as people really start getting to gardening, is pest problems. And with a change in climate and all of that, pest problems are changing and fluctuating and doing different things, but finding certain ways to do it. And you touch on it here in a certain way. And I'll just say, we had one of Mark and I's favorite gardeners from the Pacific Northwest up here. And I don't know if you've gotten to meet him at the Seattle show or not, but that's Cisco Morris.
Yeah.
And Cisco, Cisco is just an amazing, awesome, lovely gardener for sure when it comes down to it. But he really is a leader in integrated pest management. And this idea of bringing pests and utilizing, and this is getting back to this idea of getting back to nature. How does nature deal with things? How does nature combat things and all of that sort of stuff? And so every pest has its predator, and that sort of thing. And so we're trying to find these ways to bring pests and get them to do that job for us, versus utilizing things like pesticides and things like that as well too, which can just be really, really harmful. And you touch a lot about that in the book as well too, this these ideas of integrated pest management.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's this idea of, what is a creature causing an issue? Firstly, I think often we think of the likes of ladybugs and ladybug larvae. We know that they are good. We know they're really good natural predators, but then you see something that isn't quite so attractive. So say, for example, an earwig or spiders, and they can be incredibly useful predators also. So it's also, I think, looking, is a critter, as I call them, causing an issue? So if not, then why not consider letting it be? Again, in a biodiverse space, a so-called pest can be, like you said, food for something else. But it's also about what kind of role is a creature playing? And I think so often there's this perception that something that, say, an ant, there's a lot of traction around ants being pests, ants causing loads of problems. But actually, what I found is that, or I believe, is that they help to spread the mycorrhizal fungi in the soil. And I don't have an issue with them. I've got loads of ants living in my hoop tunnels, and there's an awful lot of mycorrhizal fungi. And if they were causing an issue, I'd probably just move them. but they're not. I've never seen them cause an issue. So again, it's just looking at that perception. I mean, I did a talk at RHS Hampton Court last year, and we in the UK, we had a very, very wet year. A lot of gardeners were feeling quite depressed, I think is probably the only way of describing it, because it was such a wet, dreary year, and we had so many slugs. It was just across the board. There were huge issues with slugs because it was ideal weather for them. This was like a holiday abroad. This was perfect slug weather. So, and at RHS Hampton Court, I was doing a talk about natural pest control, and I got mobbed at the end. Not literally, but I had a lot of a huddle. There was a huddle of gardeners wanting to talk more about slugs. So there can be still, even in a very biodiverse space where you have a lot of natural pest control allies, so-called pests can still get a bit out of control. So every year is different, every season's different. So last year I did make an extra effort to make sure that I was checking for slugs before planting out, because it was perfect conditions for them. But otherwise, there's no quick fix, but there's an awful lot you can do to actually get a lot of creatures on your side to help keep so-called pests in check. And the polyculture, the mixed planting, also helps massively as well, because it does make it harder for so-called pests to find what they're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, we know a lot about slugs.
There's so much there
in the Pacific Northwest. We got slugs in abundance, but there's, like you said, there's just different ways. It may be like the gravel path thing might help because it might provide an environment that's more drained or that heats up more during the day, even if it's not that warm, but just provides those subtle differences that chase some of the pests away. So there's a lot of ways. And then, you suggest, I know in your book, just the old board technique, getting out there and harvesting, feed them to your chickens, add it to another, get some ducks in your system, whatever it is. There's ways that you can add other complexities that will then feed on those, what we call pests, right? Or an outbreak of pests.
Yeah.
That's a really good point about gravel, actually. That is another very good benefit of using gravel. Slugs do not like gravel at all.
Yeah. It's an inhospitable surface, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the weather every year is different, but again, there's the resilience, right? We don't just expect one thing. Resilience means being able to deal with the extremes. So how is your system in these different extremes? That's what we're aiming at with that resilient
Absolutely. Garden. It's being prepared for anything with the weather, being prepared for any sort of eventuality, and that's why we need time to look after ourselves. To go back to what we were talking about earlier, is that if we're in this constant state of fight or flight, rushing around feeling guilty. So many gardeners feel guilty that their gardens don't look like gardens they see on TV or on social media, on Instagram. But it's just trying to be kind to yourself in the process, and garden in a way that creates some space for you to actually just to potter around your garden and to enjoy that space. It's incredibly important because it gives you space to think and to problem solve if you need an excuse.
Well, when you were saying that earlier too, and this is something in your book, and I think this is something that is a very great success for many people who are just starting, is herbs. The fragrance of herbs, and just brush an herb, you'll get a hit. Holy basil is one of my favorites for that. It's got this fruity blueberryness that you don't even know you brushed it, and then a minute later you just got this amazing, delightful smell. And that mood boost, that sense of enjoyment of the garden. I think herbs are some of the solution for a lot of people. It's just like, focus on your herbs, get the enjoyment, get the smells, get the sensuality of herbs, and then everything else will come in line.
That's so true. And actually, with the community garden that I mentioned earlier, I was working with effectively a building site to begin with. The garden, it was just really poor soil. There were no, it was there wasn't any biodiversity, there weren't a lot of pollinators, and I used herbs. I used herbs to encourage pollinators in. You got the ground beetles, the insects, as well as the soil improvement. That absolutely. And they're sensory, naturally sensory, but they provide so much benefit to a garden. I think if I was to only grow one thing, if I was pushed to only grow one thing, I would grow herbs, 100%.
Well, and just in the kitchen too, they elevate anything. I mean, you could take anything humble as a potato, and if you're able to toss in rosemary, it's a totally different dish altogether.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many medicinal benefits as well, aren't there, of herbs that people used to have this knowledge. So, if in doubt, just eat as many herbs as you can, really, just to hedge the bets.
Yeah, and another thing too is a good herb garden's a good perennial garden too. Lots of herbs are just perennials. Plant them once and just care for them, and they keep coming back and growing and growing. So those are great for that as well too. Here, before we get moving on today, this conversation's going by really, really quick. There's so much to talk about too in this book for sure. I did want to make sure I kind of touched on it, because for Mark and I who live here in the U.S. over on the West Coast, one of the big things, as I've touched on already today is, wildfires, and you kind of talk a little bit here about some wildfire resilience and some things and techniques and things like that too around houses and stuff. And I know a lot of it too wouldn't necessarily be for, I'm telling you, there's more and more of this, which gets really troubling, is that we're seeing like neighborhoods, where like houses are going down in these wildfires and stuff. Whereas, like if some places can build wildfire resilience around them, right, in order to kind of keep wildfires from getting to them, if you've got that kind of space, right? So you kind of touch on a little bit that more. Maybe you can talk about some of that mitigating fire risk that you talk about in the book.
Absolutely. I mean, again, it's very area specific, so it depends on how much land you have to work with, what also works aesthetically for you and realistically, and also from a budgetary perspective. But there's all sorts of things where you can have planters, because when plants have died back, or when they're very hot and they become, if there's a period of drought and a fire risk, they can also help literally fuel that, so, leave the leaves, but don't, in that scenario, you got to try and make sure that you're providing some sort of barrier. So you can use water. So water can be used, but also things like movable planters. It's making sure that you are not creating any fuel for a potential fire risk, and you're trying to work with materials that will also help protect your property. So there's lots of, you could talk for an hour and a half just about that topic alone, really.
Exactly.
But it's also, again, we've mentioned a lot about reaching out to your community, but it's that joined up approach. So if there is a risk, then working with your neighbours to help minimise that risk. And conversely, if there's a risk of flooding, even if you were to, say if it was a row of houses all together, if you were to get an old bin and put it outside and rainwater harvest, you can slow the flow and the build up potentially in a flash flood. So the more you can reach out and work with others, even if you find some of your neighbours, if you don't necessarily get on with them particularly that well, this can be a way, this is about your future and your security. So, helping to overcome those barriers is important. And actually, I'm obviously biased as a gardener, but gardening is such a great leveler as well. So I think the more that you can reach out to others, even if they are a bit difficult, dare I say, the better that is as well. Maybe they're just having a bad day. You don't know what's going on in people's lives. So working together within your community also goes an incredibly long way.
Well, fire and flood, these are extreme events, but there are places where we really share. It's like our common humanity is put right up against an incredible danger. I think, and so maybe there is greater opportunity for collaboration because everybody recognizes how devastating these things can be. There's an equal justice, natural justice is meted out equally in these situations. There's not a sense of like, oh, well, I'm better off than you, so I'm going to be able to do this better. And I think the urgency is more keenly felt. Whereas I think with global warming and some of these other things, they're a little more vague, and maybe it's a little harder for us to all come together and just say, look, this is a present danger. We have to change this immediately. But with fire, at least there's a sense people across very different thought lines could come together and say, yeah, I see the potential for this, and I see the potential for acting together. So some of that, I think things bring us together a little bit more, and hopefully some of the other things that are still emergencies, like plastic buildup, temperature, climate change, hopefully we'll be able to unite on those as well too, as something as drastic as fire, for example.
It's a hopeful thought, isn't it? I think, and it is a way, in an emergency situation, preconceived ideas about others just have to be left behind. Ultimately, the way to build strength is by working together, and to just leave all that at the door and just find ways to do it. I mean, I've been in situations where I've been trapped up this is a bit random, but trapped up a mountain near to me. It's not really a mountain, it's a high hill, but I'll call it a mountain, with snow. And you just, again, it's just how are we going to get out of this? What are we going to do? And you just leave everything behind. You're just focused on the here and now of what to do in that scenario. So I think so. I think there is potential for that. I hope there is. There should be. It feels good. It feels good to work with others in that way, that it's rather than it's just you facing that immediate threat, to actually reach out to other people so you can come up with solutions together.
Yeah, well, I think it's something as big as climate change. If we tackle it individually, we're bound to go toward despair, because there's no way individually we can make an impact. But if we come together as small groups of people, and then as bigger and bigger groups of awareness grow, we can do something.
Yeah, I think in some ways too, along that lines as well, and I think you kind of touched on it earlier as you were talking about some of your earlier gardening experiments around the idea of self-resilience. I think that's something we're learning a little bit more, is that's maybe a little misnomer or so, is that it's more community resilience versus self-resilience.
Mm-hmm. And I think little acts of kindness also go a long way. I think, I mean, since the pandemic, or going on from the pandemic as well, people haven't really had a chance to come down. There's been a sort of sense of prolonged fight or flightness, but actually, there's loads of science around little acts of kindness, helping others, but also helping you in the process. It can make you feel good, just from even on a small scale, with surplus plants, even just smiling at somebody, making small talk. These little things all add up. Just acknowledging other people and reaching out to them does actually make you potentially feel really good in the process. It can feel like part of the solution.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right.
All right. Yep. I'm going to do every book. I try to find something in the book to do a little bit of reading on. And I thought that with this book that you made a pretty good conclusion. I'll read part of that here. You talk on page 200. Your climate change resilient vegetable garden is so much more than just a place where you grow food. It is a nurturing haven where you can grow yourself as much as anything. It's a place where you can help reverse nature's decline, do your bit to carbon capture, reduce plastic, and feel that you are a part of the solution, part of a bigger shift toward helping to save our planet and ourselves in the process. It all counts. Bee by bee, plant by plant, nothing beats homegrown fruit and vegetables, picking fresh from plot to table, bursting with flavor, goodness, and natural vitality. You are feeding your soul as much as your stomach. Yet in this increasingly troublesome world of ours, it is harder to be in a state of calm and well-being for long. There are so many horrible things happening in the world and so many demands on us. It can be hard to switch off and simply be. Increased anxiety due to climate change and otherwise, increased social media apps and to-do lists shouting at us. It is incredibly important when you can, as much as you can, at each and every opportunity, to switch off and tune into your garden. Let nature soothe, amaze, and inspire you. What a good one. And I also want to kind of just say that and end with this as well too. I'll let you, Mark, ask one more question too to finish up, but I'll just kind of say this too, as I was kind of thinking about a lot of this during our conversation here, is we're talking a lot about us gardeners who've been gardeners already in some sort of sense. But I think some ways that this book can be really great though as well is for those who are concerned about climate change, but haven't even gardened yet, are not experienced in gardening. And if you're concerned about climate change and you're concerned about sort of these things, maybe one of your own ways of personal resilience towards things is go out and start a garden. Go out and get out there with nature, start connecting with it, get more closer to your food sources and to what's going on and all of that sort of stuff as we can find each other more in community as we go. But maybe that's a good way of some good personal activism, is just starting a garden.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's a way of taking control back, and feeling that you are nurturing something that's important and meaningful. And there's on so many different levels, 100%, from the money saving, the preciousness of the food that you nurture. There's so much to be gained from doing that. And it's accessible. If you have a windowsill, you can grow some produce on a windowsill. You don't need to have an actual garden as well, even if it's a pot outside. Like you said, Mark, grow some herbs as well, to attract the bees in. These are all small actions, but they are very meaningful and they are very feel good in the process.
My one of my early mentors in getting into ecology was a guy by the name of Albert LaChance back in New Hampshire. And he said something that stuck with me. He said, we have to look at ourselves in the mirror, and whether we're growing a geranium in a pot, it doesn't matter. Just look at yourself and say, I'm a farmer. You have to sort of just, even on the smallest of scale, just own that some relationship with the earth, some caretaking, some nurturing, some back and forth, in whatever way seems reasonable or right for you at this moment. But I think it's really important that we all include that as part of our identity. I'm a cultivator, I'm a gardener, I am something with the earth, I'm in relationship with the earth.
Absolutely. It's within our DNA, isn't it? It's that, it's that we are what we eat. It never gets boring to nurture something into life from a seed, to then nourish yourself with this plant that you have cared for, is magical and amazing and tastes good and so much fresher than anything you would get from a store or a supermarket. And it can be priceless as well, especially if you save your own seed, make your own compost.
Yeah, priceless in a lot of different ways. Priceless in that you don't need any money, and priceless in most amazing, unable to be equal. So yes, I agree.
Yeah, right on. I'm telling you, this is such a wonderful book, and we could have just went and spent a whole nother hour after this to dig into more and more and more of this. I mean, I wish in some ways we'll have to revisit this, and we will on the Let's Get Growing show as we continue growing along. But such a great book, Kim. And thanks for writing this book. Thanks for participating with our book club and being a part of all of this and helping us understand just a little bit more about what we can do to be a little bit more climate resilient in our own vegetable gardens.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much. And I'd love to come back on sometime as well. So do feel free to reach out. But no, I love it. It's meaningful for me to write this book as well. This is me feeling that I'm doing my bit as well. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for all the hard work and labor that went into writing it. And it's a gift to all of us. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent, everybody. Again, we've been talking with Kim Stoddart, author of The Climate Change Resilient Vegetable Garden. You can find a link right down below in the description, so you can get a copy of this book yourself, as well as follow Kim on Instagram and all of that as well too. She's got lots and lots of things growing on as well besides this wonderful book. So follow along with Kim and everything else that she's got growing on too. And again, thank you so much, Kim, for being here and being involved with our program. And again, I'll look forward to maybe having some more conversations with you right here on this show about some of this stuff, because again, there's just so much more we could really talk about on this and so many other things in gardening as well too. I mean, we didn't really, I mean, you touched on it just a little bit, but you're also an editor of a great gardening magazine in the UK. You do a lot of writing on all of this sort of stuff. So there's tons and tons more things to dig in with you. And we'll definitely look forward to maybe more conversations here on the Let's Get Growing show.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay,
all right,
bye.
All right. We'll see you here in just a few minutes. Thank you so much for being with us, and everybody else. We'll be right back in just one moment. Let's Get Growing is sponsored by IV Organic.
Hi, my name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with IV Organics, where we grow cool plants and author Saving the World with the Home Garden. IV Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard has 7 natural oils that protect your plants, not just from the summer heat as well as winter cold, but also protects your plants from damaging insects and rodents. The oils in the product include castor, cinnamon, clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. These oils are natural insect and rodent repellent oils, which are encapsulated by the base powder, offering your plants months of protection at a time. 1 application per year will suffice for protection against damaging summer sunburn and winter sun scald, but if the target is pests, application as much as 2 to 3 times a year may be necessary.
All right, here we are back at it again here, everybody. Thank you so much for joining with us here today and being a part of our wonderful conversation with Kim Stoddart. How about that, Mark? Another great book in the books right here on the Let's Get Growing Monthly Gardening Book Club. I mean, again, what a wonderful streak we are on.
Yeah, that one.
10 amazing books, 10 amazing authors, and definitely a great conversation today.
You know, yeah, it really was. That one left me feeling hopeful in a lot of ways. And, you know, as Kim said, writing her book was part of her response, doing her bit. I can't help but think, like, this book group seems like feels to me like we're doing our bit. We're trying to get word of these authors, get this into people's minds. I mean, I hadn't heard of Kim Stoddart before you brought this book to my attention. So I hope this book group is enabling that. And, you know, really these conversations with the authors are just precious. It's something I don't seem like I could get anywhere else but here on Let's Get Sunday edition. So
that's right.
Our part too, to spread the word on these incredible, I mean, we just keep getting these hitting it out of the park kind of books. And it's just like, it's good for people to know about this. There's these amazing movements and people are writing and thinking and solving, and here it is. We get to feature them. So that feels really amazing.
Yeah. And again, too, being real big book fans and readers and that sort of stuff is great, as we want to continue that. Books are still a really important part of how we learn and how we figure things out and get better understanding of some of the things going on in our world around us. And that's definitely the case with this book that we had today. Like you said, we've been so fortunate so far. Like you said, hitting it out of the park with some of these great books that we've had so far. 10 of them. I mean, just amazing first 10 books that we've got. But something we've been I'll mention to everybody else watching is we've been talking behind the scenes. There's just so many great books still. We're actually almost getting to a point where we're going to get bottlenecked here real soon if we with all of these amazing books and authors and things that we get the opportunity to talk with. So if you are new to our book club right now, if you haven't subscribed or you haven't been following along yet, you'll definitely want to make sure you're tuning in every third Sunday right here on the Let's Get Growing show, so you can be a part of these really wonderful conversations that we're getting to have, about all things about our garden, all things gardening. I mean, it isn't just climate change, it's all sorts of stuff. We're trying to hit all sorts of different topics and different types of books and different ways of learning and all that sort of stuff with what we're doing here. So definitely make sure that you keep following along with us. We do have, again, that's one of the things that we love to do right here we do right here at the end of our book club is we have that great awesome conversation. Again, everybody get down in the description below, get yourself a copy of this really great book here from Kim Stoddart. But now it's time to move on because we do have our 11th book.
Next book.
In the gardening, in our Let's Get Growing monthly gardening book club. And let's announce our next book. I did tease this earlier in the week. I was on a friend's podcast earlier this week. So I did tease it out and announce to everybody on the podcast because they actually kind of let it slip. They knew already. But our next book is going to be from one of our very good friends here on the Let's Get Growing show, one of our big contributors. You saw him here last week. On the second Sunday of every month, like we're here every third Sunday a month, we have our good friend Scott Wilson from the Gardener Scott channel, Master Gardener Scott Wilson. He just finished his book and it's out now, been released to everybody. Gardener Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening. This is going to be a really great book. Gardener Scott's an amazing raised bed gardener. So that's going to be our book. We'll be featuring, again, like I said, Gardener Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening. And yeah, so definitely looking forward to that. I'll also say, like we said, Gardener Scott is on the second Sunday of the month. And will be on the third Sunday of the month as well. Next month, we'll have 2 weeks in a row on the Sunday edition with Gardener Scott. And it works out really well because in May, Gardener Scott's going to have to take a break and he won't be here for the second Sunday.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Double dose of him next month just to prepare for not having him around for the month after and everything too. So really looking forward to getting to talk with Gardener Scott about his book, Raised Bed Gardening.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting him because I know what an important contributor he's been on your show, and I know that he has a huge YouTube following and really has helped to educate a lot of people on gardening. So I'm looking forward to meeting this person.
Yeah. Again, too, he's such a great conversation, so full of a lot of great knowledge and all that sort of stuff. That's why we like to have him around for our Q&A that we do with him. And but raised bed gardening, that's something that a lot of us are familiar with, especially more smaller space gardeners and stuff. I've got several raised beds that I've got in my alleyways. I've got some elevated raised beds and all of that. They're a really great way of being able to grow your food. So it'll be really good to just dig into, all about this form of gardening. It's really widely used out there.
Let's do it. Can't wait.
Yeah. Gonna be great. All right, everybody. So like I said, make sure you're tuning in, make sure you're subscribing and follow along with us as we will be here again next month, third Sunday of the month, to talk all about raised bed gardening for our monthly gardening book club with Gardener Scott. That's going to be so much fun. So again, man, what another awesome day here on the show. Mark, how amazing is this?
It really was. Just hearing from Kim around the really important work she's doing. It's that sense of, you focus on your garden, you're meant to enjoy it, spend some time out there, really relish it, get mindful, and then get connected with other people. This is how we're going to do this. This is how we can make an impact. And it's really great to have that message reinforced. And then lots of really specific garden practices, the polyculture, the soil building methods. These are so foundational. New ideas like gravel, gardening and gravel. It's so much good stuff we've been exposed to.
Yeah, is really cool, really great. And again, links in the description below. Go and check out everything and get your copy of the Climate Resilient Garden. Go and get yourself a copy of Gardener Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening and come join with us on the next month. But you don't actually have to get the book as much as we would like you to make sure you go and get the books and follow along with us, because the conversation itself is so much you can learn from. And as we have all of these exceptional gardeners with us live on the show here. So again, thank you, Mark, so much. This is so wonderful. Again, I can't imagine doing this with anybody else. This is just such a fun experience to be able to share with you as well too, and in this great monthly gardening book club that we're doing. So again, thank you for taking all your time to be a part of this as well.
Oh, it's just a total pleasure, Enoch. There's nothing I'd rather be doing either. So it's just the greatest thing. Thank you.
I know, and we'll be looking back on this day specifically too, right? Here is Mark, just sick as all can be, man. But man, you can wake up, grab a whole bunch of great energy when it comes to talking about gardening, garden books, and getting to have some wonderful conversation with these amazing authors. So
Yeah.
for sure, looking forward to it next time. And again, thank you so much for being here. I'll see you in a few minutes, and let's close out this show that we had such a great gardening conversation today on the show. Thank you all so much for being here, all of you as well too, for taking your time to be here with us on the show. It was just really great to have you along. Thanks for the questions as well too. Oh, I love this one here. Bohemian Herbology Natural Solutions says that Mark is our Bob Ross of the gardening world. Well, how about that? I don't know about up here though. But thank you for that wonderful comment. Mark is a wonderful, wonderful gardener, really great friend. I can't imagine, like I said, I can't imagine doing this with anybody else. He's such a great conversation as well too. Helps make such a great conversation here. So all right, everybody, here we go. Let's wind this down. It's time to get going. First off, I want to make sure I let everybody know what we've got coming up here on the Let's Get Growing show. Like I mentioned already, we've got Gardener Scott is our next book in the book club so join with us next month on the third Sunday of the month for our gardening book club featuring his book, Gardener Scott's Guide to Raised Bed Gardening. And as well too, like I said, we are here next Saturday. I always say Saturday and Sunday, as this great banner always shows us, but next Sunday we will be taking the Sunday edition off. I have to have a personal day. I apologize, everybody. I will, though, do what I normally do. I will set up the show for live chat. If anybody still wants to get here, I know you guys are used to getting together and hanging out and chatting with each other. So if you guys want to come here, I will have a live chat set up for the show for all of you, like we did last time too. So you guys can still come by here and say hi to each other anyways. But I will be here next Saturday, though, and next Saturday on the show, we're going to have our good friend Nate Murray from Garden Like a Viking. Nate Murray is going to come join with us from the Garden Like a Viking channel, and we'll get a chance to catch up with him as well too. It's always great to have Nate on the show, so you'll definitely want to come and check out the show next Saturday as well too. Also, I mentioned that I was on a podcast this last Wednesday. I was hanging out with my good friends Destin from the Texas Garden Guy and Phil from Phil's Figs over at the Garden Party podcast this last Wednesday. So if you want to, you can go back and check out the Garden Party podcast. Our good friend Ryan Cook from over at Heavenly Hills Homestead was the other guest there, and we had a really fun gardening conversation as well too. They have such a really fun show, and it's really it's a fun garden party over there. So you'll definitely want to go check that out if you didn't see my appearance on the Garden Party podcast. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much for being here today. And if you can, before you leave the show, click that like button, hit the thumbs up, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already, hit the bell notification, and also be sure to share with all of your friends. Let them know about the Let's Get Growing show, our monthly gardening book club, and all these wonderful conversations that we have with all of these just amazing, some of the most prominent gardeners and garden communicators in the world right here on the Let's Get Growing show. You're not going to find a show like this anywhere else. So definitely let all of your friends know about it, and follow all the links down below in the description for all of our guests, and go show them some love from the Let's Get Growing show. Go and check out one of their more recent posts or videos, and let them know that you saw them here on the Let's Get Growing show. And all right, everybody, I look forward to seeing all of you this next Saturday. So we'll see all of you then.